Oh, we're live. Hey, how you doing? Good evening. Good to see you. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Glad to see you here at Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. I am your Sensei Al Bob, your griot. And remember, don't believe a word I say. Where really it's like you can't you think a day goes by and you go, what the frack was that about? I can't believe what's going on. And it's like being on the tilt-a-wheel ride at the carnival. And if you look at it, it's getting a little nippy, so I'm gonna put my little hoodie on. Um, if you look at it, let's see if this is actually working here. Yeah. So you gang can, chime in the chat. But I've been looking at, you look at the political structure that's going across, not just in the United States, not just with the carrot head pinhead and his administration, all the wars that we're fighting, that, our country, make America great again. I mean, when was it ever great? You know, we steal it from the people who were here before us, the Aboriginal folk, indigenous folk, and we bring slavery and we indenture basically anybody who's working here. You can't vote unless you're white and own property. Women don't even exist. Pretty much everyone is property, right? And then the civil war was not about slavery. It was about a means of production and whether corporations would have the rights of individuals. And the corporate hegemony won, and that's what we got. In the Bill of 1871, I think it was, whenever they, along with the making of D.C. the District of Columbia, they basically made corporations, and then we had a continual, as David Icke would call it, the fascist two-step, and the Hegelian rule of problem, action, solution, and, we, are having, you have to realize that the world is a transnational corporate entity, right? And it goes back billions of years. It goes back to the original sin of there was love's co-creation, um, you know, creating, and it created an entity, a hegemony of a spiritual hierarchy, where Lucifer was the top dog, in heaven, and everything was run by the book, and everything was run by the book, and Lucifer had the book. He was the head dude, and love, you know, love's co-creation, which is within the construct God, the great creator. And I don't, I'm pretty particular about words, and God, if you take it all the way back to Sumerian, means ball, and whose ball, but Satan, So you have to look at the past to understand the future, right? Because in reality, we're not a linear entity. We are just bang. The Big Bang is everything, right? So, what the illusion, the incandescent Big Bang was when Lucifer got so pissed off because, God or love created a entity that had a free will. Didn't have to go by the book. Didn't have to go by the rule. Could choose whatever the heck it wanted to do. And that pissed, Lucifer, way off. And so He got so pissed off, he was like a petulant little child, and bang, his anger was so much we had the Big Bang, and that broke heaven, and it started the construct of the conflict, of the duality, and that's what we've been experiencing for the last 16 billion years or so. But that's a blink of an eye, of nothingness compared to everything of the universe, right? And they're just starting to discover dark matter and realizing that, you know, what we think is real, what we understand, what we can reference through our six senses is ridiculous. It's it's 0.003% of everything. That's our universe. That's what we think is real. The rest, the 99.99, you know, 8% of everything that we don't even know exists. That's real. So there are all these illusions. There are all these things going on. And we constantly, instead of embracing the empathy of unconditional love, we go through this fear ego syndrome, right? Where it's all about, it's about me, it's all about me. Oh, what you mean? It's about me. No, sorry, And there are people who have children and they ignore their children because it's about me. I want to masturbate. I want to jerk off. I want this. I want a fast car. I want to be the famous guy. I want the money. These are all illusions. This afternoon, if you saw the live chat that I did this afternoon, I was at a biker bar, sports grill or whatever you want to call it. And there was nobody there because people don't show up until, sometime after 4. And, but, a couple of people sauntered in for lunch. And there was this one guy, and he was kind of behind me. And I talked to him. And he was, I could sense he was a little besmirched. He wasn't angry or mad, or it wasn't about any particular things, like what it was, right? So I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And we talked a little bit. I said, "So what do you do?" He's, "Oh, I'm an electrician." I said, "Oh, so am I." And I gave him my little flash of, I was a master electrician in New York, and I was a union rep in the IBEW, Local 3. I was part of NABITH. I was IATSE. My mentor was Grandpa Stoll, the guy who had the first master electrician's license in America and started the IBEW, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so he understood everything I said. Wow, he goes, "Well, that's pretty amazing." So I said, "So what what do you do?" He said, "Well, I work for this company, and we do hospitals and, municipal things and blah, blah." So you're more than just a guy who drills a hole and pulls a piece of Romex. He goes, yeah, I'm a little more than that. And so we talked about that. And we talked about what he liked to do, how he's doing, was he's married, was he have kids, what's he's got, And I let him tell me about him. I didn't tell him. I just gave him the 411 about me being a brother electrician. And I made him feel good about what he did in his life. And so when he left, he said, "Gee, thanks. That was nice to talk. I'm glad, hope to see you again." And I could tell that his spirit had lifted. And so people would say, "So what, what did you do today? When you make any money? What are you doing? And I said, "Well, I'm here having a live chat and with my friends, and I, talked to this guy right next to me, and I made him feel better, and that made me feel better. I'm basically a homeless guy. I'm taking care of a friend of mine who's sick right now, and I'm happy to be in his basement to be, dry and warm. But in the last few weeks, I've been underneath the tarps, and it's been snowing and raining, and it's okay because you have to realize the only thing you can depend on is your death. That's the only thing that's really going to happen. So you kind of, Buddha said, if you're not ready to die, you're not ready to live. You're too constricted by all these illusions, right? Whereas death is a pretty deterministic end of the line there. So if you're, and I've died 6 times, so I've kind of, had some practice at dying. And it wasn't at my own hand, as a child, I was very sick. I died 3 times there. First time I ever smoked really good marijuana in a serious way, I conked out, right? And who ever heard of ODing on marijuana? Not too many. But I'm so sensitive, physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. It kind of, and what it did was it just bounced me out of my sack. And that's when I realized that the body is just an avatar, because I was floating up on the ceiling and, I was sitting in a circle of guys. It was just like the 70s show, and it was in the 70s. It actually was late 60s. And I was working for the Boys Athletic League, and I was involved through the union with a lot of social activities. And I was trying to do all these things, because the more I did them, the more I realized, hey, I like this. I like helping people. I like being involved. I like being able to, be me and do something for somebody other than me, right? And my other ulterior motive was the Vietnam War was going on, and I wanted to show the powers that shouldn't be that they wouldn't want me. I'm not their kind of guy who would obey orders, and I wouldn't, I want to help people, and so maybe they give me alternative service, right? And so I did that that summer, and it turned out to be the greatest experience of my young life. And that what happened was I was not prepared for this, and I was set up, and it was in 1966, 67, and the riots were going on in Newark and Harlem and Bed-Stuy. And so the government put money in this nonprofit, the Boys Athletic League, which was run by Local 3. They started it because the unions used to be a very social entity, right? And 12 minutes. So anyway, long story short, I get put in this place where this is up near West Point, right, in Bear Mountain, upstate New York. And it's really beautiful, and there's lots of water and lakes and all kinds of hills, and they put us in. They expand the Boys Athletic League. Most summers they would, what they would do is get kids out of the cities and bring them up into the Adirondacks and have them be in the woods for 3 or 4 weeks, and because of all the rioting, they wanted to get as many kids out of there, so they expanded it exponentially. So they went from, 2,500 kids for the summer, where to the point they did 60,000. So they had all these kind of camps on the edge of West Point from World War I and World War II, and they, made one of the camps a camp for us, and they didn't do it. They just dropped us off there, and we had to fix up these old, barracky things that were from, back in the day, and had been abandoned for the last 40 years. And, nothing worked. The electricity, when we went through this, because I'm an electrician, I said, I can fix this. Through the switch, and the things that blew up, and, so we had that and get the plumbing working and the water running. And we had to do it. And there was only 16 of us, and this one guy who had been a counselor, and they made him a director of the camp. And we're trying to fix the place up. And he's going on about, when you find the boys masturbating, you should. And we're like, what get lost, right? So he stayed in his office. We fixed it up the way we liked it. And we got this guy who was basically an alcoholic as our chef. And he was pretty good at grilling things. But other than that, oatmeal, breakfast, lunch, no. So anyway, kids show up and they give us the oldest boys first, and they give us 300. There's 16 of us, and we're all white except for Benny, who was um, um, Arab. He came from Egypt, but he came from a pretty rich family, and he was as bourgeois as we were. And we were all like college kids or about to go into college, and we were all doing this to ameliorate our draft status. Anyway, so these kids come up and they're 16 years old. I'm 16, right? And the other guys were nobody was any older than like 22. And so there was 300 of these 16-year-old kids who were all gang kids and had weapons, chains and knives and guns. And they got off the bus and they looked at us and laughed and just beat the crap out of us and ran us off the campus and took over. Right. And so we ran down, 8 miles down to the Peter Pan Diner off of the interstate. And we're there. And the cops kind of are laughing at us because we all have long hair and I didn't. Anyway, long story short, Benny, who is the most streetwise of all of us, said, we need to play these kids. And he went over to the cops and said, guys, you've heard what happened. Oh, yeah, we know what's happened. The kids are going wild up there and there's nobody up there. And we'll probably have to end up going up there with the fire hoses and the dogs. And I said, no, let's do something different. Why don't you come up, a couple of police cars, drive us up, and I'll make a little speech and say, listen, guys, the buses are coming. They're going to take you back to New York City, and you can have a hot, stinky, fracking summer, or you can stay here, and we won't tell you what to do. Just don't kill us. Let's, get along and do the best we can, right? Let's have some fun. And so the cop said, yeah, that'll be interesting to watch. And so Benny goes up there and he convinced those kids because they knew the buses weren't coming. He said, the buses are coming. They'll be here, in an hour. And you got an hour to make up your mind whether you want to stay here or get it back on the bus and go to the crappy city. Anyway, so the kids said, okay, so you're not going to tell us what? No, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're going to work together. And so what we decided to do, because trying to run the camp the way the Boys Athletic League wanted us was like, no. And what happened at the height of the guys going nuts, our director grabbed one of the boys who had been having a relationship because he had been a camper and then he was just a counselor and he was having a thing, and he takes the money out of the safe, and we only had one vehicle, and he, gets the kid in the car and takes off, and they're going to go have their own good time, wherever they go. And so we're left. And so that was a big black mark on the Boys Athletic League, because the guy did that and took the money and, there's all these kids up there and they got no supervision, no direct. Anyway, they left us alone. We tried to call back to the home office. They wouldn't pick up the phone, so we had to figure out what to do. So we basically did that. We said, okay, guys, let's do that. So I was the art guy. I was I ran the art cabin, drawing and I went in there and all they had was like stuff to make lanyards, and they had some stuff to make moccasins, right? And they had bolts of like this fake, skins, and leathery stuff, right? And so we decided that we weren't going to be black or Hispanic or Irish, because that was the three major groups: the Irish, the Italian, the blacks, and the Puerto Ricans, and they were ready to kill each other. And we decided we were going to become Indian tribes. Because what happened to the art cabin, I was there and I was, first I was trying to teach them how to draw, how to paint, because I had, been studying, scenic design. So I was getting into being a painter. And nobody wanted to paint anything, but they were like kind of, well, what is, they were like into lanyards, who knew? And so I'm there and this kid comes in, he goes, can I have a saw? And I was like, sure. what do you want to do with this? I'm going to cut a tree down and make a totem pole. I said, well, that sounds cool. So he takes the saw to. So the cabin was on stilts and it was right on the edge of the lake, right on this hill, right? And it was here and it was on a hill, and they had, four, things supporting the cabin, which was like about 30 by 30. Anyway, kid goes down there and he cuts the two back ones, right? Takes a chunk out of them, and he cuts the two front ones, takes chunks out of it, and then he cuts a little bit, to all the way through on one, takes the same to the other one, and then he takes a big rock and rolls it down the hill so it smashes into one of the legs as it snaps right off, and the other three snap, and the whole building tumbles down the hill into the lake, right? And, the end of the art thing. And that's when I said, okay, that's it. Okay, good. And I went over and I basically turned all the electricity off in the whole camp and pulled the big major fuses out from the meter, and said, fuck it, good. We're just going to live in the trees. Okay. And we did. And we became tribes, right? And so instead of having, 300 boys, it turned out to these little tribes of 10 and 15 went off in the woods, right? And built, tree houses and cabins and stuff, took other buildings apart and built that. And we let them do it. And they felt so, empowered, right? And we just kept doing that to the point where they were, by the second week, they were running everything. And the 16 of us just hung out we were the counselors to each of those tribes, but we let them do it the way they wanted to do it, right? And we ate what they wanted to eat, and and so and we basically were just running around basically naked. We were wearing like loincloths and moccasins, and we had paint on our face, and people would come up and check on us, and it was like they would come because it was a big winding road to come into the camp off the major county road, and they would come in, and there'd be these like little hamlets all over, the hills, and they'd see all these half-naked kids running around looking like Indians. We never showered. We had no water. We weren't showering. I kept the spring going into. They had a catchment, and that was our drinking water. And each of the camps, we did, slit trenches and lie. And we actually ran a very trim, tip-top ship, though it wasn't close to anything that anyone would call normal. But it was loads of fun for these guys. And they really, really got into it. And there was a big library of Indian lore. Those guys went and read all those books. That's when my grandma used to take me to the Museum of the American Indian, which was in New York City next to the Natural Museum. And that's when you could really see that white people screwed over the Indians because they stole all their sacred stuff and put it in this museum, right? Indians are very upset about that. And they tried to, sue the government because they had treaties, blah, blah, blah. And, the government just ignored them, And the rich people, look, the noble savage, look at all this, and we're going to make a museum for it, Anyway, so these kids got into that, and it brought them around to who they really were, who they're indigenous, the American African, American Puerto Rican, the American Irish, American Italian. They were all indigenous people at a certain point. And they really got off on that. So anyway, at a certain point, and we would have these, I forgot what we call them, hoedowns or powwows. And we would, instead of having, because this thing was on a big hill, so there wasn't any big place we could all get. So what we would do is we built a big raft and we built a bonfire on it and we pushed it out into the lake. We went out in canoes and we'd have our powwows, around this burning fire in the lake. And all the other camps that were on this lake could see us making a gigantic bonfire in the lake, right? And be out there late at night, hooping and hollering and having a grand old time. And so the first camp that came over to visit us was the girls' camp. And these boys were so naive. The girls were way ahead of the boys. And so they were like, you're kind of cute. And so we had these older guys, the 16-year-olds, and these girls kind of hitting on them. And so it was getting towards the third week when a new crew was going to come in. So we had this thing called a senior camper, meaning if you're a really good camper, you could stay on and be an assistant to a counselor to the next group that was going to show up, right? So the oldest boys came first, so the 16-year-olds to about 14, and the next group was going to be about 13 to about 10, and then the last group was going to be the 10-year-olds to about 8. So we told them, so they're really good, so we're going to have, we're going to do this powwow in our thing, and we're going to invite all the other camps. And there was a kind of, not a ball field, but a thing where there was a church where all the camps would come and go to the church. Even though we had a lot of Muslims, a lot of Jews, it was everyone went to the Christian church, and it was Catholic. So anyway, so we had a big, where all the camps came, and we made all kinds of rides and had food, and these guys made bow and arrows, and so they shot, and they're half naked, and all the other guys are like, and all the girls are like, "Ooh, look at these naked boys," and it really impressed everyone. And the town down there where the Peter Pan Diner was, sent up there the newspaper for the county, and they did a big story, and it kind of got a little news flash, right? So the Boys Athletic League, I mean, we got a lot of positive everything. The people in the town, they didn't look at, these crappy, hippies who we were, and these, gangsters who were the kids. No, these were like, wow, look what they're doing. They're being unbelievably self-sufficient. So next, the next group comes on a bus, another 300. And instead of the older boys getting on the bus, we kept those 300 and took the next 300. So now we had 600 kids, right? And and it wasn't just 300. We had more. We had almost 700 kids when the second trip came. And the tribes got bigger, and everyone got along, and everything got smoother and smoother. So at some point, us, the 16 of us, said, we should get more counselors. We now have 700 kids here. Yes, they're running everything kind of well, but we need a little more, keeping an eye on things. So I asked some of the kids, I said, do you have older brothers? And I said, we're all white. I mean, Eddie was the only close guy to being black, and he was Arab. He came from Egypt. And so we asked the kids, do you have any older brothers who might want to come up and be a counselor and hang? We're not getting paid, but they get out of the city. And this one guy said, oh yes, my brother's been wanting to know where I am and what's going on, and so we called him up, and we went down and met his brothers, and by that time we had been given another vehicle. And so we drove, it was a station wagon, and we drove down into the city, into the Bronx. And these guys, there were 4 brothers, and they had a big business selling boo, right? And so they're bringing down these bags full of boo, right? And stuffing it in there until it's like hanging out the windows, and the smell was like, well, this is good boo. And so, but they wanted, because they had a little dust up with another sales crew. And so they just decided they would take their product and just leave town and let because all these riots and conflicts and shootouts and da 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 da, you might as well just let all those other people shoot each other, and then they would come back in the fall, and things would be calmed down, and they'd still have their product, and they could go from there. So I went with Eddie and a few other folks who were a little more streetwise. I mean, I was streetwise, but again, I was always a naive. I trusted everyone. So we're driving up, and Eddie's actually driving, and I'm sitting in the front seat with Eddie, and another one of our comrades was in the back seat with the other brothers, right? And the car is just stuffed with boo, right? And the smell was like you could smell it, blocks away, right? And it's hanging out the windows, and we're going up, the thruway, and then we hit the parkway, and then we go up whatever road it was that went into Bear Mountain. And so we're coming up this big hill, and we kind of get there. It's like Saturday, and they got the road blocked off for the drunks, right? So because it's summertime, and there are a lot of people up there now in Bear Mountain area. It's like a lot of tourists. Anyway, so we got stopped by the state troopers, and I knew the guys, right? They were the guys who took us up to the camp at the beginning, right? And all this boo is sticking out, and it's smelling like it. And they're looking at the brothers, and these guys in the back, the four brothers, they're like, as dark as a spades, and it was pretty freaking amazing. So Copley's got his flashlight on my face. Oh, where are you going? I said, we're going to camp. I got these guys to, we needed some more counselors. And he looks at the product, and he looks at me, and he just sighs and goes, okay, I'm going to lead you up, through the roadblock so no one bothers you, and I'll just take you to camp. And I said, yeah, thank you, Officer Bob. And this is back in the day when police would do things like this, right? So, because he had come up and visited a number of times, especially when we had our powwows and our rodeos, and he thought we were really great. He brought us food, and he did a lot of really great things, right? And he would come to church, and he was a church-going guy, and he was, he was very supportive of us. So he, led the way in his police car with the blinking lights, and us in the station wagon with four brothers in the back, and lots of boo, and went right up to camp and went in there. So we set up the boys. They got into it. We put all of the product away in the counselor lounge, and that was one of the last buildings that was still standing. And I kept the electricity running in the counselor's lounge and had hot water so we could have showers. And the boys didn't care. They would run around half naked and always jumping in the lake, and they didn't need showers. They want showers. They ran the place. If they wanted showers, I would have let them have showers, but they didn't really care. And so we're, so now we got 700 kids, and they are running the place like clockwork. Really, we're really doing nothing except leading by example, being nice, being kind, coming up with ideas of, what do you guys think of this? What do you want to do? And what different things, we're doing all of this, but is there anything else? So they started growing their own food and gardening and being self-sufficient. And they loved building stuff. They tore all the buildings, that the army camp was, and built these like tree houses. It was like, whatever they wanted to do, they could do, as long as no one got hurt, no one got angry, no one beat anybody up. There were no violence. And it was, we had 700 gangster kids from Brownsville and Harlem and Red Hook, Italians, Irish, blacks and Puerto Ricans. These kids in New York City would be in gangs wanting to kill each other, but here they were in tribes and they were loving each other. It was amazing, and we sang songs, you know, everything. There was one of the counselors who was a pretty good musician and a good singer, and he sang, you know, Arlo Guthrie songs, and he sang Beatles songs, and he sang, you know, you know, Kingston Trio songs, and he sang black songs, Marvin Gaye, and you name it, we were singing it, and that was, everybody was singing. Everyone was singing all the time, especially when we were breaking bread with each other, right? So here these kids growing food, cooking for themselves, baking. They were baking. This one lady came up and taught a bunch, she helped us build ovens she brought up 55-gallon drums, and we put them in the ground and covered them with stone and mud, and it had a fire pit underneath the drum, and we would bake in it, and we were making tofu and sprouts, and this is not food that these kids, but they took to it like, fish in water. And it was amazing how self-sufficient. So we, the guys, we had a lot of time on our hand. I mean, during the day, we were always there. But after we would have our campfire and go to, put the kids to bed around 10, 11, because we would get them up with, the sun. They would get up with the sun or earlier. But mostly we put them to bed around 10, and they would get up and roam around, start fires, cook, do stuff. As long as it was down low and everyone was kind of just, resting, it was fine. So we would hang out at the counselor's cabin. And so we're sitting in a circle, and, everyone's been smoking boo since the brothers got there. And I never really did. Now, I've been around boo for a long time. I was working in theaters, so we're in the theater crew. Those guys are always smoking boo. And I'm hanging out with artists, and artists are always. I was hanging up in Harlem with the musicians. Now, those guys were really smoking boo. So, but I never did. It never really interested me. I was never drawn to it. And my people who I spent most of my time with, they were like, adults slash elders, and were, trying to guide me in a higher sensibility. So, smoking boo is not part of that higher sensibility. But now I'm hanging with these guys 24/7. They're my brothers, and we're sitting around, and it's just like the 70s movie. They're like passing it in a circle, right? Anyway, it comes, I'm sitting in the circle the whole time, and I'm usually just drinking water, right? And so, and they would drink a little, because some of those guys were, in their 20s, so they had other, things to drink. And so, anyway, so we're getting pretty loose, and so, the liquids come around, and pass it on. But the cigarette comes on. I've seen these guys smoking boo. I've seen all these people I know in the arts smoking boo. And I go, nobody's died. It's all good. And the stuff we're smoking is real. They called it lamb's breath. And it was the little purple hairs that are on the buds, right? Not just the buds, but the purple hair. Super duper, THC, right? So it's this thing, and the way the guy rolled it, he used the kind of, he called it a blunt, and it was like, looked like a cigar, and the only thing that burnt was the inside of the blunt, because everything else was kind of moist. The paper was moist, the leaves were moist, but the lamb's breath was dry and burnt very well. So you lit it, and it would burn on the inside. And because it was moist, and they put flavors like the alcohol on it, and and so this one had some kind of liqueur, a raspberry liqueur. So it tasted like raspberries, and it was sweet, and it was cool. So when I breathed it in, I didn't choke or anything. It was like, wow, this is pretty good. So I took the next breath in, and I really took it deep into my lungs. And I go, oh, this is pretty good. And that's when it kind of started. I started to get lit, and so I kept. So everyone chuckled because I hadn't been a smoker at all. So they just lit up a few more blunts, and I let me keep this one, and I just kept sucking on it until I kind of got up and said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and everything turned sideways and started to spin, and I started seeing dimensions and you know little elves and fairies and unicorns and all of a sudden, slowly, I fall over. And a couple of guys see me going over, and they get up and they kind of grab me by the shirt just before I hit the ground. So I don't hit it hard. And one guy actually was good enough to put his hand behind my head. So I didn't hurt my back or my neck or my head. But my butt hit the ground first, and it was all dusty, and and I remember seeing all this stuff. I said, "Oh, it's fairy dust, fairy," and that was the last words. It's fairy dust. It's fairy dust. Boom, and everyone got up and was he okay? And all of a sudden, I found myself not, you know, stoned anymore, but I was on the ceiling, and the Counselor's Lodge was a really interesting building because it was kind of built on a motif of a teepee, but it was a building. So it was a couple stories high. So the top part where we were hanging out was the top part, and it had a fire pit, concrete slab with stone around it. We built fires, and it would go up out of the hole in the ceiling, right, which you could close like a teepee. You can. Anyway, so the fire was there, and and everything was shimmering, and all the faces were shimmering in the light, and I was on the ceiling, and I was looking at everybody, and they were freaking out, and they were like, "He's dead! He's dead! Like he's not breathing!" And they're like, and they didn't know CPR, and so they broke a rib. They were hitting my chest so freaking hard, they freaking broke a rib. And I was looking, like, oh, look at that. And then I heard these voices behind me. And I would come to know Akasha K, one of my guides, and a few other teachers on the other realms. And they were like chuckling. And they go, they think you're dead. I said, well, am I? I'm like up here on the ceiling talking to you guys, and my body's down there. And that's when they explained to me that was just an avatar. That's just a bag of water. That's not who you are. You know? Oh, oh. See, other times I died, when I was a baby, and I remember that, them trying to pull my head off, get me out of my mother's uterus. And when I was 10, when I died in a Catholic hospital in Florida, and I punched a nun out, and when I woke up, I was in bed, chained, chained to the bed, and I had one of those Hannibal Lecter masks over my head, so I couldn't talk, and I was in my own feces and urine. The nuns hadn't changed I had punched one of the nuns out. So, luckily, when I came to about 30 minutes, and I kept saying, "This is it. I'm never getting sick again. I'm never getting sick again. I'm never getting sick again," and I never got sick again. After I've got from birth till 10. I got super sick every friggin' year, 3 or 4 times. Because when they choked me to death as an infant, it did a thing to my throat, and it still I have throat. Whenever that's the thing in my lungs too. So I would get these sinus infections, and especially after the nun broke the orbit in my eye and my jaw, and I could hardly speak and had a stutter. From 0 to 10, I had a tough time. But being in that hospital bed saying, I'm never getting so I'm never letting anybody fucking do this to me again. Rack this, And so I was, you know, so that was the third time, 16, I conk out. And because the spirits wanted to talk to me. And I would see things often, but my mother called it, oh, you have such an imagination, because I tell people the stories and the things I saw. And he's such an imaginative boy. He's, first I thought I was nuts, especially after, and so the nun nearly killed me, broke the orbit, broke my jaw, broke my fingers. And, when my mom came to see what happened to me, and I was this bloody mess in the head nun's office, and the nun said to my mother, oh, don't worry. We're going to send your son. We have the ambulance coming. He's going to go to the mental institution, and he's going to have a lobotomy tonight. He'll be out of your way, and we'll keep him there, and he'll be a vegetable. And my mom said, no, forget, because my mom had run hospitals. My mom was, the Uber queen in the 1930s, right? And she had quite the life. From the time she was about 15 until she married my dad at about 32, she was the dude. She ran things. I mean, that's why, genetically, I get that from my mom. And so she said, no, he's different and he's a challenge, but no, he's not nuts and he's not this. And you're going to be hearing from our lawyer, because the nun thought my mom being the uber Catholic she was, she'd roll over for the nun and they would do the little body on me. So there'd be no evidence of what they did to me. I'd just be drooling in a corner. But my mom said, no. And then my, cardinal godfather said, okay, he needs to. And, after I healed up from that, they sent me off to, I stayed with a group of priests who were Maranols, and they were scholars. They weren't Jesuits looking to control and power and bugger boys. They were there to do Jesus's will, to do, and they're the first ones who really, intellectually, scholarly explained to me, the whole story and what God was love's co-creation. And they took me all the way back pre-Sumerian, pre-Egyptian, pre-Babylonian, all the way back to Atlantis. And they had quite the library. And, one guy was a shrink, one guy was, a sociologist, one guy was an anthropologist, one guy was a linguist, one guy was a physicist. And, for 5 to 10 months, it's like the nun beat me into, a pulp in October. I got out of the hospital the end of October. I went and stayed with those guys November and came back and stayed with them December, came back for Christmas, went back to them New Year's and stayed there until spring when I, almost summer, I guess. Yeah, it was probably almost summer. And then I went and stayed with my grandma. And then I went and went to public school, and I went to some pretty good public schools. But back to the camp, and so there I'm up on the ceiling, and these guides tell me, you're here. You made a contract with Love's Co-Creation before you showed up, and if you want to understand any of this, you need to go to xratted.blogspot.com and read my novels. And all these novels, I call them cuts, right? There's cut 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And the last two I put up was one's called same as it ever was, Don't Believe a Word I Said, and the other one is called Legacy. And then there's 5 cuts before those two. So, and they're all about somewhere between 70 and 180 pages long, right? So, and they're all stories about, it's kind of like the Bible, based kind of on what happened, just a story. Don't believe a word I say, but go read all of that stuff in xratted.blogspot.com, and put some comments there. I'd like some feedback on my writing. I'd like that. And if you want to talk to me on any longer sensibility of something, get a hold of me at the dude awake 42 at gmail. Okay. So anyway, they put me into. I started to breathe. When the guy said, "Okay, you go get back in your body," because I was feeling no pain up on the ceiling, and I didn't see my mentors, my guides, my teachers, but I heard them, right, and so they kind of filled me in on what death was and what life was, and that if you're not ready to die, I said, you should, you know your life is going to be punctuated with your death, right? But you're going to do it all in this. You got a pretty strong body. You lived. You survived birth. You survived that first 10 years when you were sick all the friggin' time. And they said we did this so you wouldn't have to be exposed to the real toxicity of the society around you. That's why your grandmother took you away, so you wouldn't be exposed until you were ready to survive your family. Because my family was like a pack of feral wolves, right? And but they were okay. Everyone in my family I loved dearly, and even though my youngest sister tried to kill me a few times, she tried to stab me, she tried to drown me in a bucket of black paint. She stuck me into. We were in a room with my mother, and we were at the cleaners, and she pushed me into this machine that pressed shirts and then boxed them. So and I was a little peanut of a guy until I got to be about 13. Then I, did one of those spurts. I went from being about 4'8" to being, you know, almost 6 feet in less than a year. And I think I say so short because my grandma was short, and I like to be on her level. And Madame Olga Kluber, she was a dwarf, so she was really short. So, though, you know, Billy Kluver, he was 6 something. Anyway, and so was Grandpa Stoll. But Mike, his son, was short. And you can never tell about genetics. So anyway, um, I was told that, I would die many times, but I wouldn't really die. It would be punctuations, like the end of a paragraph, and then you'd go on to the next storyline. And we were talking about this, and someone was talking earlier today when we had a live chat, and we had a nice, we had a lot of people there, 18. I guess it's too late for you guys, right? It's right now about 12, almost 1 a.m. here, Eastern Standard Time, and I've been talking for about 53 minutes, waiting for you guys to show up, and maybe the two of you to make a few comments. But anyway, um, so that's when the guy said, go read Buddha about death, go read Plato about death, go read Socrates about death. And they basically all said, if you're not ready to die, you're not ready to live. And the great Greek states, Syracuse and Athens, and who's the big military crew of those guys? Sparta. They all understood death, especially the Spartans. Death was nothing to them. They're all about living their life, right? So there's only one of you left. Well, I hope you're enjoying the story. Um, so anyway, this is all a lead in, waiting for the crew to show up, because I wanted to talk about the death that we're experiencing right now, the cultural death, the social death, the environmental death, and now we have the grand pandemic. We've had, the Hidden Hand has been trying to knock us off, Agenda 21, where the powers that shouldn't be at the UN want the world population to go down to 500 million people. You know, we have close to 8 billion, give or take. And we live on a planet of abundance. Guys like Bill Gates, just Bill Gates, he has more money than 40% of the population of the earth. Because that 40% are ridiculously poor. They're living on $1 a day. Some are living on 20 cents a day. So Bill Gates, that one chucklehead, and he did nothing. All of those guys, Gates, Jobs, all of those morons, Facebook Larry and Google Pinhead, all those guys were just poster boys. They all went to this stupid school for gifted children where they got programmed to be, poster boys. Now, I went to schools like that. I went to schools where really rich people went, really powerful. These guys aren't rich or powerful. They just do what they're told, and they're poster boys. And so they have a lot of cash. Doesn't mean squat, especially when, the money they have is being printed on a printing press that comes from a toilet roll, our money. So we're going to have, the stock market is about to hit 30,000. Back when it was about to hit 25,000. Back when it was about to hit 17,000, I said, as soon as it hits 17,000, the market's going to collapse, right? But between then and now, we had the dot-com bubble, we had the Y2K bubble, we had the 08 bubble, and now the bubble. Now, we have so overextended ourselves. Our deficits are like Mondo Bizarro. All the money has been taken away. We have no real value to anything within our monetary system. And the rug is going to be pulled out. 08 was just a little test. See how little munchkins will react to this, right? So, go read Agenda 21, right? It's on the internet. Everything is on the internet. That is, part of this Illuminati. And the Illuminati, they're like, American cheese, of the mystery schools, right? They're just, Albert Pike came up with this, thing, the Illuminati, which was, a thing of another thing of another thing of another thing. Again, it's just a poster boy, And it's, guys like Rothschild and Rockefeller and those clowns. Again, all just poster children that are pushing the, hidden agenda of the hidden hand, right? And those guys are just poster boys. This is all a hierarchy, right? If you start studying the mystery schools, you start to understand this whole story. And so, here I am pushing 71, and, I've spent at least a good 60 years, all of my life, I really didn't realize my little path until, that nun beat the ever living crap out of me, and I hung out with those Marinol guys for about 8 months, and they were really righteous people. They were serving. Again, they were the first guys to really give me the 411 on this whole hierarchy thing and love's co-creation, and that they said they were like beyond sex. They took vows, real serious vows. get some water. Just gonna stick it right there. Well, if I survive this, I'll be back. Well, with this, you guys need to get, well, we're back. Essential oils, right? This is eucalyptus, right? I put some all of the trees, eucalyptus, tea tree, peppermint, and licorice root, not candy, not licorice chopped up in pills, but the root itself that you suck on, chew on. Those will be, they're antifungal, antiviral, right? And this new NCV, and the World Health Organization is basically an element of the United Nations. And the United Nations was bought, sold, and paid for by the Rockefeller brothers, David and Nelson. The land that was built on was right next to Rockefeller Foundation, was their property. They spent the $20 million to build that building, and they spent another $50 million to bankroll it for the first 5 years. And it represents their economic hegemony, right? And so there is a thing, they're calling it the novel coronavirus, right? And the PSCM, right? And what that is the World Health Organization's thing that they've set up. Oh, look at that. As soon as I start talking about something interesting, my connection is unstable. Please wait. Wow. We try to reconnect. Well, if you go to Oppenheimer Ranch project with Diamond. He's all over this, and he has gone and found some really excellent scholars. Hey, there are people here, right? Trevor, hey Trev, hey Bob, been a while. Yep, buddy, there you are, buddy. How you doing? Pushing 17, more like it, Bob. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yikes. Yep. Anyway, so I survived that little thing. So my lungs are still, they're the only thing that's keeping me alive is meditation, bringing the prana into my lungs. Because they are really, been messed up since birth, right? And from there, things have gone awry, right? And the 10 years I spent in the arms, in the bosom of nihilist hedonism and the corporate structure, I it's a wonder I'm alive. But I've got a job to do, and that is to talk to you. So, so unless you're ready to, face your death, and once you do that, once you realize, okay, I've died 6 times. It's like slipping out of a tight slipper. This thing here is just my avatar, just my ugly bag of water, even though I am kind of cute. And so, (1952). Yep. So, 52 was a good year. I remember it well. I remember my birth. I mean, who would forget, being choked to death by the moron doctors and being saved by an archangel, Dr. Teresa Black, And she was one of the first, birth doctors, And there she was in this operating room. My mom's knocked out, and these guys are like trying to pull me. I was a breached baby, and they're trying to pull me out, and the umbilical was wrapped around my neck, and she pushed them away, stuck me back in the uterus, turned me around, unrolled that thing, and I came right out. And then she, took care of me, and so, and she stayed my doctor, Dr. Black, until I was 10, until we moved out of the neighborhood. And so, and she was my grandma's good buddy. And, she got along with my mom pretty well. So my mom ran hospitals, and Dr. Teresa, she knew of the power and will and the myth of my mother. So, but my lungs have still always been kind of funky. So where you been, Trev? So, buddy, Trevor, let's get into the conversation of this. What do you guys think of death? Right? Have you had any near-death experiences yourself? I told the story of my. It was called Camp Arenda. You could go look that one up. And the Boys Athletic League. Go look that up. And I had some great photos from that time. And my father threw away a lot of photos from the time I started taking pictures at 10 years old. And he threw out a chunk. Like when I worked at the Fillmore East, I had all these photos of, the Who and Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, and my dad threw them away when I was living in Europe. My house, I do what I want. Yeah. I bought so many photos. I don't know how many smartphones I've had, and they stopped working. And that's it. So, what did you get from that, buddy? Seeing your life flash in front of your eyes. I've had that same experience a couple of times. Yep. The last time I died, let's see, a rush. But didn't you get any insight, any cognitive going, When I was about 58 or so, I was still taking my parents died in 08. And I guess I was 60 something in 08. Or maybe 50, maybe not quite 60 yet. Anyway, yes, not quite 60 yet. I was like 58, give or take. Anyway, so I was taking care of my folks, and I had, I came back from Ireland in 1980, and my brothers and sisters and my parents were fighting over the family business, and I kind of negotiated it out, and my father finally retired, and he went off to Florida, and he said to me, because I was the only one who could get along with him, because after 40 years of my dad having his thumb on my brothers and sisters' life, they didn't want anything to do with him. Anyway, so he said, you have to take care of us. I said, okay, but you have to be good. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you're not the scumbags that your children and other people play you to be, because my parents could be. My mom made Adolf Hitler look like, Mickey Mouse. She was a scary monster when she wanted to be. But if you played on to her better side, she was loads of fun and really smart, and really, I always loved talking to my mom. She would suss anything out, and she knew a lot of people, and she taught me how to, know a lot of people and get them not to owe you a favor, but owe you a favor, So, so I took care of my parents, and they were in their 70s. I said, oh, they'll die soon. I can put in a few years. And I said, I'm doing this. People think, oh, you're such a saint. No, I always kind of have a semi-ulterior motive. My ulterior motive to take care of my parents was I wanted to talk to them about everything they did to us and let them know that not everything was hunky-dory. And I wanted to know my parents better than I thought I knew them. So when they died, I would have said everything. There was one year I wrote a 22-page diatribe about what my parents did to me, at least twice a month for a whole year. I gave them, 24 22-page long things of all the stuff, all the stories of all the shit they ever did, and so what'd you think about that? Now, my mom read it and corrected all my spelling. My dad would read it and start to cry. And so, and then they friggin' lived another 28 years, right? So I said and did, and so one of the little rules I said to my parents from the beginning, I said, you got to be your better self, because you're kind of fun when you're being your better self. So, when you're that scumbag person, I'm not going to be there. My dad said, but what if I fall down the staircase? I said, you better be on your best behavior after you fall down that staircase, because I'm not going to have anything to do with you. If you're being the scumbag you are, not going to be there. Right? So anyway, I took care of him for 28 years. Yeah, and not with an ulterior motive. Like when my parents got really sick and they were, on the way out, my sisters used to call, are they dead yet? Are they dead? And what happened with my mom, she, my dad, he was a sweetie in a lot. He really loved my mother. And he, she was the admiral of the Navy and my dad was just the captain of the boat. So he got her a lot of jewelry, a lot of bling, because he would she'd wear it, and he'd take her out to these fancy parties and stuff, and she would bling it up. Anyway, when she was, just sitting at the table the last 10 years of her life, looking out the window, she would, she would like take her hearing aids out, and what it was, he was always cleaning. He threw out probably $250,000 worth of my mom's bling, because she would wrap it up in toilet paper and he would throw it away. And I didn't really realize that until, she basically threw most of her stuff away. And she, I'm pretty sure she did that on purpose. And she actually, like I said, my dad never really realized that, because he was the one who was throwing she'd wrap it up, she'd leave it on the table. And anyway, so when my sister showed up, my mom had thrown all her jewelry away after she died, She didn't want him to have it, But my ulterior motive to my parents, taking care of them, wasn't like that they were going to leave me a lot of money. My dad used to say, "Oh, when I die, you're all going to be millionaires." Well, not so much. He spent it all. And then in '08, just before he died, he lost half of his total liquidity, right? And the only value he had was in this real estate. And my sisters were so anxious about getting money from it, they sold all the real estate in '08 and '09, the worst time to sell. I said, no, let's just rent this shit out. And, in 5-6 years, it's going to be worth a lot of money. Because it was worth a few million before the crash. Anyway, that's all under the bridge. But my ulterior motive to take care of my parents was to understand them completely, tell them everything I ever felt about them. So once they were dead, all I would have is good memories. And I wouldn't, go, oh, I wish. So my mom dies, and she really took the swan song. Took her almost a year to die, meaning she died, came back, died, came back, died, came back, to the point where the guys in the hospital got tired of her and sent her home. And, we took care of her. I found people to take care of her. And so when she finally did die, again, it took 6 days for her to die, because, I'm there, and I got these 4 women to take care of my parents, and they really did an amazing job. And there's this one woman named Timothy, who she had been doing this for 30 years. And this was, my dad, he screamed at me, "You got to come and take care of us. We need you." Like, no. And I was working from the test bill. I said, "Dad, you want to pay me $30,000? I'll come right now." It's like Johnny Boy. I haven't really talked to him in a long time. And he basically said, "Where are you? Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm out in the middle of the woods taking care of some sick friends." "Oh, you have to come. Come right now. Can't you come right now and stay with me for?" And I said, "John, I'm 200 miles away. It cost me about $100 to just, and I don't have the money to buy the gas or get there. And you'll just throw me out, and then I'll have no place to live, and I'll have to spend another $100 so that I don't have to come back here." He goes, "Well, just come for a day." He had no idea. I said, "But I'm taking care of some people who really." "Oh, you're not really. They don't need you." I said, "No, that we're out in the middle of the woods. They live in these little houses, and all their family are dead." He goes, "What do you mean they're dead?" "Well, around here, in the the center of Ozark, Appalachian poverty, these folks have been screwed, and they have zero health care. The meth and OxyContin. There was a pharmacy around here that in 3 years filled 9 million prescriptions for OxyContin. And the DEA knew all about it, but they never shut them down. It wasn't until there was a little shootout at the OK Corral and the place burnt to the ground that it stopped doing it. And that's where we are today, right? So here I am in a place where I'm surrounded by this amazing wealth, these college towns, real, and everyone in these hollers, I can show you, people who are obese, but they're starving to death at the same time. Right? And so, yep. I ask you a question. Yeah. I can understand content is way too nice. But be a little more, take that apart for me, explain that a bit. So my mom, took her 6 days to die. And don't worry, I haven't touched oxygen. Right. Luckily, see, my body, I can't do any drugs. Like, I was a disco king. I could never touch cocaine. When I worked in the rock and roll industry, all the producers loved me because, I could go out, be part of the crew, and I wouldn't do any of their blow. I wouldn't do any of their drugs. I wouldn't do any of their stash. And I would, wouldn't drink. I would be the designated driver. The chauffeur of the limo would be toast, and he'd be asleep over in the corner, and I'd be driving the limo. And so, anyway, the one thing I realized about being sick, the one good thing about it is it makes you appreciate being well. So I have my good points and my bad points, and I don't focus on the bad points. I focus on the good points. And, and I have, and John asked, so what are you doing? Are you making any money? And I said, John, I live on $74 a month, and, who's giving you money? I said, well, I have Social Security. That's it, and he said, well, you can stay with me for a day. I said, John, not going to happen. John, focus on bringing your children, your two boys from Texas, to live with you. You have that beautiful school. You fixed it all up. They would love it. This would be a great time. You need to spend some time with your boys. Well, I can't do it. It makes me so nervous, and she won't let me do it. And he found every excuse, right? And then ended up blaming me. I hadn't talked to him in, a month or two. And then when I called him up to see how he was doing, all he could do is tell me it was my fault. And that's why I called John the canary in the coal mine, because virtually everyone finds a scapegoat instead of looking in the mirror. I loved Michael Jackson's song, The Man in the Mirror. That guy was, for all his faults, he put together some pretty amazing songs. And so I try to look in the mirror at least 3 times a day, all go. Yep, we're all going to die. That's the one thing you can depend on. And so just get used to it, understand it, research it, slip out of the slipper every now and then. That's what meditation's all about. When I do those kind of meditations and I take you to your Akashic record, that's what that tool is, the best tool you can. It shows you everything that your soul has ever experienced. That should be something to motivate you to live a life. That's why I've had so many of them. I wasn't, I would get really good at something, and then it was no longer that interesting, that exciting, and then the different foibles of it, when I was involved in, the environmental movements, the political movements, the, esoteric and occult things, that's why I never joined any of this, I would be the dude. I could cruise in, waltz in, take the best parts of any of those experiences, share them with the folks I could help by using them, and then move on and do something other exciting. That's why one summer I worked in a carnival, I really loved it because we would cruise into a town, be there for a week or so, and then move on to another town. We in that one summer of about 4 months, we hit about 20 towns, and it was like 20 different lives. I mean, we would cruise in, we would be on the edge of town. They gave me um, the pickup because I was a guy that made sure that everything was safe and worked, and I was the master electrician because those things, carnivals, they don't hook up to the grid. They have a big trailer, a big diesel generator that runs, 500 volts. Everything's 500 volts. All those big motors running the tilt-a-wheel and the merry-go-round and all that stuff and all those lights. That comes because it's a lot cheaper for them to drag their own generator and put some diesel in the tank than try to, constantly deal with utility companies. So that's what I did that. And there was another guy who was a mechanical guy. He and I made sure that no one died in those carny rides. And so, the most interesting woman there who was, not married, who was she scared everyone else, was the gypsy, card reader, psychic. And she was the one who really taught me how to read palms and do cards and do the hook. She taught me the hook. And she was a really good, sociologist, psychologist. She had a degree in psychology, right? But she was the hottest gypsy girl. And all the guys were scared because she would just crush them, She would burn them out. Me, I was just a love bunny, and snuggled and loved her and loved her and loved her. It wasn't like the volcano. We had our volcano moments, but that was, 5 months. That was like a whole lifetime. And I've had about 20 of those, if not more. Right? And some of them lasted longer, And but every time I kind of run into the hidden hand, and like I keep telling them, hey, AI, you're watching me right now. It's time for you guys to hire me again. I mean, I'm not going to, what am I going to work in a IHOPs cleaning dishes? I don't think so. I can live on, the piddling, and because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. You live out in the woods. You don't spend a lot of money, Pretty much in the last 3 weeks, I haven't really gone anywhere except for each time I've done a live count. Now I've tweaked the Wi-Fi here, And the only thing, I thought John was going to invite me back for at least a few weeks. And, John has the best Wi-Fi on the planet, And he's up there. I thought he was working for his parents, but obviously he hasn't done anything except be up at that school all by his lonesome. Right? I have to clean it up and fix it so my family can come back and Danica will want to live. No, never, Yeah, the career. Career? Career. I've just been me wherever I've been, right? And that's usually more than enough for everybody around me, right? And then when it gets a bit too much, I move on. That's another reason why I move on, right? Though I find people who truly career, yeah. Right. I'm a career kind of guy, right? I'm a career psycho, shamanic, psychosocial, cultural, forensic, anthropologic, alchemist. That's my career. Right? Yep. Look after, and everyone is my friend. All my relations are my friends. Right? Yep. But I basically don't have to do anything, right? So I don't have to take care of John. I don't have to be there. It's been a year and 3 months since I really have been. In that year and 3 months, I have gone to visit John 4 times, and he's thrown me out each time. And the collective hours of those 4 times has been 26 hours. So in a year and 3 months, I have spent 26 hours with John Boy. And, he's you're taking advantage. You're costing me money. I've been there for a year and 3 months, John. And that's what a lot of people do. They look to seek to find, blame. Our lives are our own. Whatever goes on in our life is our fault, And I learned that one real early. And that's why I don't lie, cheat, or steal. Because it takes too much effort to do those things. And there is no real return value, if it made, and even guys like the Orange Pinhead and the ilk of the powers that shouldn't be, and the sock puppets and the usual suspects, all of those folks who are like, Bill Gates and whoever else is richer than rich, they don't look too happy. They don't look too. Bill Gates's partner, what was his name? It'll pop into my head. But a friend of mine, he has a 30,000 square foot house in Florida near Stewart in Jensen Beach. And my friend, who was a master electrician down there, he was a big dude, master electrician down there in Stewart, got the job to, be the electrician of this. But it was totally artificial intelligence, remote control, gizmo robot house. And so he's pretty good at, he can wire any Hardys, or, he can even wire a hospital or two. But this was a bit past him, and the lighting had to be perfect. And I'm a lighting designer, and the architect really didn't specify. He just kind of drew these pictures on how he wanted it to look. So I gave my friend a hand and helped him pick out what kind of lighting instruments would give the look. And, I'm really great at terminating, meaning at the end, after all the holes are drilled, the wires are pulled, and the boxes are in, and it's just, sheetrock's on, and the wires are hanging out, and you have to put it together so it works. That's my best. I can still do that even I can't go up on ladders, but I can run a crew and say, okay, put that fixture up there and do it this way. So that's what I did with him. Alan, that's the guy's name. Bill Gates's partner was something Alan, right? Anyway, so we're doing that, and the architect's there, and all the people, the general contractor, there are like 8 different general contractors, and my friend was the only real one singular sub, right? The plumbing, the this or that, there were lots of the HVAC, because they would get to a point where they were so frustrated by, the client that they left, right? So here's this gigantic building, and it was really pretty impressive. It's like the lights would go on and go off as you walk through. You could ask it to do things. It would, put the temperature at whatever you say. I want it 70, and I want it to smell like this, and I want this kind of, you just tell the house and it would do it, right? And this was, in the 90s, late 90s, I guess it was early O's. And yeah, it was early O's. My parents were already not doing the best, and they were kind of stuck in Florida, pretty much. And so, so I would get little gigs like that. And so my friend, I didn't have to do a lot of hard work. I did the kind of fun stuff. And I was the dude. I'd walk in there and, I would fix everyone's problems, not even non-electrical problems, And I only spoke to the Allen guy once, and he was so oblivious to life. And he treated everyone like they were insects. And he wasn't the smartest, there were, and he had a big staff. Once the thing got up and running, we still had to go back and work the bugs out. It took about a year to work. Once it opened, had the big party and a whoop-de-doo. We still were there. And Christmas time, this guy covered the place in Christmas lights. And he had a staff of 60 people. And so this was only one of 20 of his houses, right? And all of the other houses were just as big, right? And the way I looked at it was he was like an industry unto himself. He had a staff of 160 people, whether he was there or not. I mean, he was there maybe once a year, if that. And the electrician and I, we put I never went there by myself, but the guy at the gate knew me. All this, staff inside knew me. They'd love it when I dropped by. And they could make me a nice lunch, and I could use the jacuzzi or the pool, and they could tell me their problems. So I'd read their palms and their cards, and that's the kind of life I lead. I have many different skill sets, and I can exercise any of them for salary. But my true value is how I help people, like what I did today for that guy who I was having lunch. Telescopes were eyeglasses. I used to have these great glasses that were surgeon's glasses that were like microscopes. It was great for doing circuitry work. And I also had a great pair of night vision goggles. One of my Merck friends gave me these, and this was in the 80s, when people didn't even know what they were. But they were goggles, and they were like telescopes. You could push this little button, and it had different powers. And, you could really see far away, and you could see really, really well, people's faces. And also had a little like USB port where you could, put a little memory chip. And this is like before memory chips, and this thing had them. I didn't have one, but it had a place where you could, hit this other button on the glasses and take a picture of it, right? And that was in the, early 80s. And those were really great glasses. And I've had a lot of great stuff, and then people borrow them, and I never quite get them back. And because I don't need them, I don't, basically say, well, I guess they need them more than I do. And a friend of mine who is a big UFO nut, once we went out one night and looked up at the sky and used these glasses, and all this stuff was zipping around. And the thing is, so that guy took them. People, like I remember my wife would get pissed off when people would take stuff from me. And I said, well, I got 4 others, so they took one. Who cares? I'm not at a loss. I don't need that, right? And like those goggles, I didn't get it, but I had loads of friends who had even better ones. And if I wanted to borrow them, they'd lend them to me because they knew I would give them back. And because I got the story, my dad, once we had a neighbor, Mr. Orr, and he was an engineer. He had the best of everything. And my dad borrowed an electric saw in the 50s. No one had an electric saw. And Mr. Orr had a German one, really good, heavy metal, man. It was like having a table saw in your hand. And my father borrowed it from him. And for the 8 years that we lived in that house, Mr. Orr said, hey, Ray, can I have my saw back? Oh, no. His name Bob or no, Bob, I got it. And I still have that because my father kept it all the way till the day he died. He had a ton of shit like that he borrowed from people because, oh, sure, Ray, you can borrow that. And then he'd never give it back, I always gave it back. And stuff I have that I don't need, I give to people who need it. Just like the guy who took those night vision, they're probably worth a couple grand, in that day. Now you can buy things like that on QVC, for 3 payments of $19.99. Everyone complains about how the government sucks and never does anything right. Well, the government actually does a lot of great things. Went to the moon, gave us the internet, gave us smartphones, gave us, all of that crap. Its ulterior motive gave us all that crap so it could control us. But our tax dollars did all that. Now, the really criminal thing about this, our tax dollars did all that, built all these systems, right? And then we sold them or controlled them or decommissioned them and gave them to the corporate world, right? And what's going to happen? Our whole military is in this process right now being decontrolled and put in the, corporate world, Lockheed Martin, Douglas, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon. They own they control. That's why we're having all these wars, for their benefit. So they make money. And now you can file a Freedom of Information request, a FOIA report. But you got to know exactly what you're looking for. You got to give them the number and everything. They made it hard. But guys like me who do their homework can find these things, right? But when that information is owned by Lockheed Martin and Grumman and Boeing, you can't get it because it's proprietorial. Now, they will let, like, why China, has sent, robots to the moon was, well, we did that in the 50s, and the Nazis did it in the 30s. But we, when the Challenger blew up, we needed, somebody to put our satellites into space. So we let Russia and China do it. We let China launch Keyhole, the big super duper spy satellites, let them launch them. And we would bring, the super duper, spy satellite with unbelievable technology in it, and we would put it in a warehouse that the Chinese would guard and make sure no one stole that stuff. But they would guard it, right? Same with the Russians. Russians have been putting us in space, for the last, since the shuttle went down, Now, we do have the Atlas Agena and a few others, and, SpaceX and Blue Dolphin and a few other guys are coming online. But all that stuff is turning space into the corporate world. Now, the orange pinhead is, we're going to have a space force. Well, we've had a space force. It's been called Solar Warden since the 40s, right? And the flying saucers, you often heard, it looked cigar-shaped. And what that was, Solar Warden, was run by the Navy because the Navy had submarines. And once we did the Polaris submarines, we had these submarines that could go down, into 1,000 feet, where the pressure was like unbelievable. Space doesn't even have that. You just need to have something that can have a environment. So they would take their submarines and they would put anti-grav. Now, if you go read Aviation in Space and this other magazine called Space News, and it has been both of those things, Aviation in Space has been published in some manner since the 1930s, and Space News since the 40s, right? And when I was at the UN, you can't buy those magazines off the newsstand. Now, you can find them at libraries. You go to some colleges, they have an aeronautic engineering thing. Well, both those things have everything ever done. And so you go to especially Aviation in Space, you go to that magazine, and it's weekly, comes out every week, and it tells you everything everyone's doing in aviation in space. I mean, everyone, right? You don't need the CIA, you just need to read that magazine. And so Anthony Bug, what is the true nature of reality and life? Your thoughts? Thanks. Okay, we can go there. Well, I've been talking now for an hour and 45 minutes. I've kind of hit on a lot of avenues. The bottom line, Anthony, reality is what we perceive as reality, because we only perceive 0.009% of anything through our eyes, our ears, our nose, our mouth. Our senses are very limited. So we don't even have a clue of what reality is. But what we think is reality is an illusion, doesn't really exist. Your body is just an ugly bag of water, right? It's an avatar for your soul, which is in some server someplace else, right? And what we are here to experience. That's why this life doesn't matter, whether you die right now or 10 years from now. It's the experiences that you accumulate that you can perceive and understand as what's kind of going on. And the only true thing, the only lens, is love's co-creation. Because love is, I want to use the word I don't like using the word God, because in Sumerian, God means Satan, Baal, the horned one, No, the only true love is love's co-creation, and that's the only true God. The true creator is love's co-creation. So, in a nutsack, everything's an illusion. The only truth is, and the only real thing is love. We are here to serve love's co-creation in being the artist in the first person as the aboriginal. Not having any guile or any hidden agendas. You're just here to serve love's co-creation by creating. Well, the government is another illusion word, for slavery. But you have to remember, we allow it to happen. If we didn't, like me, I'm like cutting back on that. Living in the forest, eating bark, and mushrooms, and living on, $75 a month, that gets less and less, right? Now, I'm going to talk to you guys, so I need this little laptop. I need to do other things, so I have my little smartphone. So I have to pay my $40 a month to my provider, and so. But I do not need any of this. I do this to serve you guys, to assist the cadre, because what all of you need to do is, in your own way, every day, take the piece of the earth and make it stronger. You have to interact with the world that's around you. I keep inviting everyone to come here to the Deep Green. Not right now. It's snowing and raining and you wouldn't like it. But, around end of April, anyone who wants to come. And we can, try to put together the Traveling Video Art Circus to take this whole show on the road, build we need artists and technicians, people in with a business sense who, IT folk, right? And they all have to, artists have to be those things too. When I went to Juilliard, or really the best school of this, was when I went to Cooper Union. And that was an art school, an architectural school, engineering school. If you went to study art, you had to take engineering and architecture. You went to be an architect, you had to study art and engineering. It was really good, and they did this because they wanted to build a community of that university, not just these little colleges where people just studied their little discipline and didn't know squat. No, they wanted a real community, and that's why that school is still there. And when I went there, every student there went. That school wasn't taking money from you. That school provided everything, paid your tuition, your housing, your everything. Some people even got stipends. And they did it because the people who started were very rich, and they put all their money into endowments to take care of the school. Now, some people who ran that school later in the 90s and the O's, absconded with a good deal of the cash through investments that didn't quite turn out for the school. So I think they're starting to charge a little bit, but it still has that kind of philosophy. And so every college has a student activity fund, and they take $200 or $300 from each student, and then they pay for lectures and dances and stuff like that. But every semester they got to spend every penny. So from the middle of the semester to the end, they start to get desperate about, we got to spend this money. So we put together a good website and put together a good curriculum that we're going to bring them entertainment and education and insight and, enabling all the student body to become better than they think they are. Well, that's taking the show on the road. And the traveling video art circus would leave. We would be like the Johnny Appleseed, and we would leave in each of the schools that we would visit a really inquiring society. Now, colleges, they have fraternities, sororities, and societies. And those things, once they get established, stay there forever, unless they do something bad. Whereas the chess club, the computer club, they're all clubs. They die every semester. So we go there, put on a good show, get a bunch of kids really excited about having a freely, meaning not to be free, like you don't pay, but free, meaning open-minded, inquiring to understand society, community. That would amazingly change every college. It would be like injecting, this new, virus called love into the body politic of the government. Because the government are all these schools. When Eisenhower coined the phrase military-industrial complex, he left out a few things. It's a military-industrial media, banking, education entity, complex. And that's what's screwing the society, right? Because it's all about power and money and fear and anger and self-loathing instead of love's co-creation, right? So it would behoove the hidden hand and the, powers that shouldn't be to bankroll us, support us, put us at the top of the algorithm and have this thing go viral. So, instead of 6 people watching, even though I love the fact that 6 of you are here, if we had, thousands, this really caught, the whole concept of love's co-creation. And the thing is everything I talk about, a lot of other people are talking about it. That's a really interesting thing. There are lots of people out there. David Icke, dark journalists, Linda Moulton Howe, and Joseph P. Farrell, Catherine Austin Fitts. I mean, there's, Diamond of the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. There's hundreds, thousands of really good people using this medium of the YouTube. And we are at a point, this window of opportunity, we have to take, if we have to make a new internet or a new YouTube or a new any of this, you have to realize all of this was created by people like ourselves, not some gigantic corporation. The big corporations kind of took it over, The guys who invented the internet, it was just a handful of geeks who did this, right? And they were like me. I mean, salutations, Candace. I spent a good 30 years in the scholarly profession because I liked it, I liked the people, and I would I was, an itinerant scholar, a hired gun. I would go to these different universities and study things within the structure of a project I was being paid for by people like the Brookings Institute or Carnegie Mellon. And they would do it in all different universities. Like my first experience of that was in 1969 at Duke University, where DARPA funded all these companies that they were just cutouts for them. And there was this thing called uh, the SEAL Corporation. And what they were developing was super soldiers. They were studying esoteric Sufism and meditation and ESP and all of that. Guys who could stick swords through their um, cheeks and pull it out, and the thing would heal within a half an hour. You couldn't even see a scar. And that was my first little exposure to that. And I had been building sensory deprivation tanks for the Theosophical Society and the ISIS Foundation. So I had the know-how. And so when I stumbled into Duke and met this really amazing woman who was a grad student who was working in this program, she was the queen of paranormal psychology. She was everything that went bump in the night. And we used to bump in the night a lot. But, and she loved me because I had a totally open mind and I could I could actively listen to what she was saying, process it, and ask pointed questions that she goes, well, that's a great question. I'll have to think about. And that would lead to great sex. And which, again, because every man was scared, nobody would touch this girl, even though she was hot and amazingly good looking and smart and brilliant. But that was like too much for most guys, because she wouldn't take no shit from nobody. And the fact that I didn't, I was just there to love her, to support her, to share my life with her and hers with me, and that we did it moment to moment, meaning we were together really solid for 6 months. And then she said, I'm going to go to another university. It's been great. See you soon. I got this great opportunity. And right about the same time, I got a great opportunity to go someplace else. And that has been my life, right? And right now, it may not seem to be as, movie oriented, but it's the same. Like, John asked me, so, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm helping people. Why do you do that? You're just a selfish guy. Again, he's just reflecting his own image. And that's what Lacan said. Whenever anyone says, you know what you are, they're talking about themselves. But I tried to explain that, there isn't any greater pleasure than making someone else happy. And that's why it's important that he has ignored his children most of their lives. And now they're right now, that one's 13, the other's, I think, 10. And right now, if he were to bring them back to his house and up on that hill, it's an amazing, magical place. They could learn so much and he has a lot to teach them. He said, I could teach them how to do real estate. I said, no, teach them how to make movies, teach them how to play music, teach them how to paint. Show them by example and be supportive with them. Right? I mean, the best time I ever painted, when I was my best as being a painter, was when I had two girlfriends who were painters. And we would just, we had a loft and we would paint together, and my best photography was when I was with my first wife, Donna, and, we had a photo studio, DNA, for about 8 years. And at a certain point, we got a certain level of notoriety, and she didn't want to share that. She didn't say, I don't want DNA in them. I just want Donna. So I said, sure, honey, not a problem. So That's what life's about. It's about experience. It's not about accumulating stuff or a career being famous or rich or any of the above. It's about sharing love and experience. And that's what Love's Co-Creation is all about. Boo, 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 boo. So I've been very blessed that my body does not like. I mean, it likes a little boo every now and then. It likes a nice single malt liquor every now and then, a nice good bottle of wine, a little bit of champagne. That's about it. Anything else, I get sick. My body's too sensitive, and I can't do any. One glass of single malt liquor lasts me the whole night. 2 glasses of wine with dinner, that's all I need. Um, just a little. I'm like Cowley, just a little puff. And I love sharing boo. I love doing the 70s thing, sitting in a circle and passion boo. This is, yep. What is it? Well, did I answer Anthony? Did I answer the what is the true nature of reality and life? And do I need to fill anything else in there? So it's been 2 hours and 1 minute. So I want to talk a little bit about the political system. It's pretty obvious with what happened in Illinois, where whatever state that was. Bernie would have won hands down, but the Democratic, DNC and the Republican Party are just two wings of the same corporate bird. So they don't want Bernie to be, on the dais. The United States is the only country only industrialized, wealthy country that doesn't have single payer health care. We spend more money on health care, and we're like number 33. Cuba has better health care than we do. I mean, they're like 8, and they have no money. And we do everything we can to screw them, right? So our political system is based on stupidity, fear, self-loathing, egocentric, maniacal prejudice, right? And it has been since, day one, since Christopher Columbus, right? So Bernie, but he's part of the thing, he's been a senator, he's been in the scene, calls himself a socialist. Please. He's more like what the Europeans have, social democrats. That's what he is, right? But he has his own political masters, and they say you have to call yourself a socialist. Now he kind of does in historical sense, because back in the day when America was as close to kind of working for everybody was when we didn't just have a two-party system. We had Democrats, Republicans. We had labor, socialist, communist, environmentalist, and religious party. And the religious wasn't just a wacko, guys who want to, why does, our guys support Israel like it does? Israel has 8 million people, 0.02% of the world's population. They are the 4th strongest, most powerful military in the world, which we gave them. We give them billions of dollars every year in military aid. Look at this, oh, it's a great deal, Israel and, the two, no. Basically, they offered the people who were there before Israel was there, and Israel has taken their land. When Israel in 47 started out, it was like this much, and the rest of the neck of the woods was this, and everybody kind of got along, but it just kept having these wars that took all the land, and now they're about to take the whole valley, and and they said, oh, those guys can live there, but they only got 4 years to go along with the thing, and after those 4 years, Israel will have taken all their land and then just put them in jail for being terrorists. Now, who's the terrorists? The guys who have high-powered rifles, the Israelis, sitting on the fence, killing children who are just, got signs and stones, who's the terrorist? The guys who are basically shooting bottle rockets and a few mortars here and there, and, they bomb whole cities out with the F-15s that we've given them, right? So you have to look at this, what happened to, why did we go into Iraq? Weapons of mass destruction? No. We wanted to steal their stuff, their oil and their sacred artifacts out there in the desert. That's where the real army went. The real army surrounded the museum in Baghdad and took all the keys to all those artifacts, all the time, tunnels and exotic weapons from time long gone. And that's why we went to Iraq in 91, and that's why we went into Iraq, in 03, right? Why'd we go into Afghanistan? When everyone who was flying the planes were guys from Saudi Arabia, There wasn't any guys, Afghanis, right? And when we said, you got to give up the Al-Qaeda, Taliban said, sure, come, whatever. And then we bombed the crap out of them, right? The only time Afghanistan is the center of poppies, England brought the poppy, opium, to Afghanistan and then forced it on China. The Opium Wars wasn't China trying to force England to smoke. Oh, no. It was, and England, just like Rome, Rome had bread and circus. England had sugar, white flour, opium, and booze, and they brought it to these indigenous people, got them addicted, and took their stuff. And that is the business plan of, so we have in Rome, we have the Vatican City. That is a isolated, separated entity unto itself. In England, we have, the city of London. And in America, we have the District of Columbia. The Vatican owns everyone's soul, or tries to make everyone think they do. And the City of London owns all the money. That's where Mr. Rothschild has all this. It's his octopus of central banking across the world. The IMF, the World Bank, all those things come out of there. And the District of Columbia has the Pentagon, a satanic symbol of death and soul killing. And, the only thing we export out of America is death, And we can't fight it with having, a movement. The only movement we can have is a good bowel movement. And the movement of our hearts loves co-creation. And the one physical representation of that is culture, art. That's why I want to put together the traveling video art circus. Why do you think, media is owned by six, when I was a kid, there were 500 companies that owned the media, the newspapers, the radios, the TVs, and the movies, right? 500. Now there's 6. And they're all interlocked, meaning all the people on one board are on the guys on the other board. So they pretty much run by this corporate behemoth called the Hidden Hand. and it's administered through the vehicle of the powers that shouldn't be, and their minions are the usual suspects, and the usual suspects are people like, our present uh, Attorney General, what's his name, Bowel Movement, and the guy who's got the big mustache. Oh, I was there when everything happened, and I could tell you. And all he had to do was go on Fox News, right? But did he? No. He says, "Wait till the book comes out. It's going to cost $35." This has to change. And the closest thing. So Bernie, what would be very interesting is if Bernie right now said, after New Hampshire, he goes, "Listen, I am not a communist. I'm not even I'm a social democrat, just like the guys in Europe, right? In Sweden, in Norway, in Denmark. I'm that kind of social democrat, and I'm announcing right now my vice president is going to be Tulsi Gabbard, right? And my attorney general is going to be Ralph Nader." And just go down the line like that and pick all the people who would be really, and none of them coming from Wall Street. I mean, Donald Trump said, "I'm going to get rid of the deep state." Well, he put all the deep state people he could, So, so we have this window of opportunity. It's when March 1st rolls around, we're going to be in T minus 10 months, right? So that's the political structure. We have all of this war and conflict, and the carrot pinhead. His whole administration what's so great about it is that it's so incompetently stupid, and he incriminates himself every time he opens his mouth, and that's why you can realize the Democratic Party wants Donald Trump to be president in the next time, because poor Donnie, I feel sorry for the guy. I mean, he is scum, but bottom line is he was put there by the corporate structure to be, they're going to blame everything on the carrot pinhead, and his kids, and everyone's going to be dressed in orange, that's for sure. Or, as Benny said, we hang together or we all hang separately. And so, and we will end up with Mike Pence as the last president, and we'll be living in a dystopian, Hunger Game, because we live in, I don't know, when you have limited funds, as I do, since September, food prices have gone up 40%. Now, certain, they have a special this day on that, and so they can spread it out to a point where you don't really see it. But like the other day, I bought 2 cans of refried beans, 2 little cans of tomato paste, some mozzarella cheese, some what else did I get? I got a rotisserie chicken, because I sometimes don't have a place to really cook a chicken. So you get that, and then you make chicken salad sandwiches and fajitas and soups with that chicken. It goes a long way. So I go to Walmart's and get the cheapest one I can. So anyway, the other day I bought that. What else did I get? I got 2 or 3 other items that were on sale. I needed some oregano. And what else? I got about 12 items, and it cost $23. And I was going to get some zinc oxide stuff that you put in your nose, which is a really good immune booster and virus killer. Cost $18. The last time I bought it, it cost $6. And that was like a year or so ago. So things that people are really going to need is like in China right now. My sources are like it that bottle of hand sanitizer that was made in China a year ago, and I bought it at the Dollar Tree for $1. I could go sell that for about $100 uh, in gold at one of those cities. And China now has 80 cities in quarantine. And I don't know if you've seen any of those images of the guys in suits dragging people out of their houses who won't, because the, all of China now, if you're living in a city, you have to take your temperature uh, hourly and phone it in. And if you don't, they come and get you, right? And they see that, and then and those, oh, we just built a hospital. It took us a week to build this hospital. Well, what that hospital really is just a jail, right? And so they're using this. First, they bungled it because this one eye doctor, because people, you are most susceptible to get a virus through your eyes. And so he noticed something back last in 19, in May of 2019, that something was amiss, right? And he brought it to notice to his health department there in the ground zero city of 6 million people. And he also did the initial groundwork to isolate the people, his patients who seem to have this viral thing. Um, it was coming out of this, food market at the end of town. And he went there, and there was a place about 2 blocks from that food market that was scraping bat funguses and viruses off of out of bats, and then after the bat's dead, selling the bat as meat at that market, right? And this place was not a stage 4 lab. They were doing it on a coffee table in shorts and t-shirts, and didn't have gloves, and they were using straight razors, so they were cutting themselves. And so and they were taking this material that they were gathering and giving it to a very sophisticated laboratory, that had all the bells and whistles, all the CRISPRs and all the, technology to isolate. And what they did was they took a rhinovirus and took its RNA, and then took 4 chunks of different coronaviruses. And what a coronavirus is a virus that's not so much DNA but RNA. And they took 4 different types from bats that have been around, right? And that have, caused SARS and caused other different, diseases, right? And they took out different parts of their RNA, and then took this other RNA and sliced it up, and they took 4 chunks out, and they stuck 4 different bat RNA representations of this coronavirus. And one is something that enables the virus to easily get into your lung, get into your aeolus, right? Because it's often very difficult to get in there, right? And then there was another one that kind of, like AIDS, kind of dampen your immune system, so it won't go after it. And then there is another one that causes your body to think it's getting better when it's getting worse. And then another one to like hammer it in so it can't go away. So this is so they've taken a little bit of AIDS and a little bit of Ebola, and so this doctor went and got that data and brought it to some people who had more know-how than him, and they were getting pretty concerned about that. So he took all of this to the health department of his city, which is, in China, everything goes from the top down. And so they arrested him and harassed him and beat him up. And then he ends up dying of this virus. So it's pretty obvious that this was a manufactured thing, and it's China is at a real crossroads politically, and they're going to suffer politically for this because it's shows their total incompetence, but it'll enable them to basically get rid of whatever element of freedom the people in China have. And it'll be like their version of the Patriot Act, but it'll be even worse because it'll be biologic. Right? It's one thing to be political, like what we have. I mean, we have like kissed our Constitution goodbye through the, Patriot Act and the NDAA. Now, our country, and it was already taken. The Cold War did this to us. Once we signed the 1947, we signed this, National Security Act. And, that got rid of the Constitution basically, but they keep adding little tidbits to it to really, get down. And so that's what's going to happen in our country. So there's probably, there's been research showing that China has not 40,000 infected folks, but 2.4 million infected folks. And they are, getting infected people, 20, 30, 40,000 people by the hour. And it hasn't been 900 people that has died, but something close to, 250,000. No, these aren't, don't believe a word I say, but go do your own homework. A good place to start is Diamond's Oppenheimer Ranch project, right? Go look at what he's got a very good crew of people who have just gotten back from China, who are microbiologists, who are, guys who study the pathogen of diseases, and who have all worked at the WHO and know its foibles and know where it's coming from. And I have to even, you have to take a grain of salt with everything. Like I say, don't believe a word I say. You have to do this homework yourself. But these things are coming down. And, well, we passed one Patriot Act. If a lot of people start to get sick in America, they're going to pass a biological, Patriot Act, where, they will just willy-nilly take whoever they want and, put them into these quote-unquote hospitals, which are really just death camps, I mean, the satellite imaging infrared coming from those cities, fires are burning like you can't believe, Crematoriums are going, so much so that they just make an open pits and throwing people in, throwing gas on them. So, again, don't believe a word I say. Go check this stuff out, right? So, instead of being scared by this, instead of being petrified and allow yourself being controlled by this, this is a time for you to investigate yourself, become self-aware, and then become, put yourself in a place, just like we did in Camp Orinda, where we took care of ourselves, We built our own place, we grew our own food. These were all kids who were from the hood. I remember taking a group of kids on a hike, and the youngest kids who came up on the bus, we were all dressed as Indians. We had feathers and paint on our face and wearing loincloths, and mostly everybody was barefoot. And we took the kids and said, okay, kids, drop your stuff over here at this lean-to, get your bedroll, and whatever you need for the evening, and we're going to take a little hike. And we hiked them all the way up to the big mountains in Bear Mountain. And the older boys were already up there, and they set up camp and had a big fire, and there's stuff for s'mores and hot dogs and everything. And they were all dressed like with bones in their nose. And so we were, they got there at about 4. We got them somewhat settled, and we went on a hike starting around 5, and it started to get dark around 8. And I remember taking a group of about 40 kids, just me and 2 other counselors and 4 of the older boys, and we were marching them up. Oh, I'm getting tired. I've never walked like and this raccoon went across the path, and this kid lost it. He goes, "Look at that rat! Look how big he is! Oh my God, he's as big as it's a rat the size of a dog!" Ah! Well, it's a pretty big raccoon, and the raccoon just looked at us and just kept going. And so we got up to the top of the hill, the mountain, and the big fire's going, and the guys are like drumming away and got the bones in the nose. And the kids are like, and then we made them some hot chocolate and hot dogs, and we told stories, And we were, taking care of ourselves. We have to be not just self-aware, but self-supporting, self-sustainable, and what we think is sustainability in this country, it's like, oh, we needed we got to have a windmill for our laptop. No, that's not sustainability. Sustainability is me living in the woods, eating bark and mushrooms. That's sustainability. And having spring water come to me by a garden hose, So, I'm glad to tell you the story because that's my job. I'm your griot, A griot tells you a story that gives you perspective so you can make up your own mind, right? You need to, in all your own communities, start doing stuff, right? Start building your own cachet of stories. And that comes from experiences, doing stuff, And, go help kids who need help, And, so I had never had any biological children, but I had 127 godchildren because I had a number of godfathers taking care of me. So all of these kids were kids who were homeless, basically, on the street, running around in the 1980s, with guns and trying to be gangsters. And they were, 14, 15 years old. And I'd say, wait, where are you going with that gun? Come over here, And they would come over, and I'd read them their palm, and I said, listen, where's your parents? Where's your family? Don't have any. Where are you living? On the street. And I said, well, you need to not live on the street. So I would take them to one of the abandoned buildings that we were fixing up and said, here's an apartment just for you. Get some friends, share it, and I'm going to show you how to, look at this thing. It's burnt out. I said, yeah, but you can clean it up. So I'd take them to one floor that I was working on, and I'd have them help me clean that floor up. And, we wouldn't get dumpsters. We'd knock, the windows were burnt out. So we'd, kick out the rest of the glass, and we would throw all of the crap, burnt out stuff, everything, the charred walls, out the window into the backyard, right? And we'd make a gigantic pile, and we'd crush it up, and we'd burn it up, and we'd take the metals, separate out the metals, and we take it down to the metal guy, and get $40 to $100, depending on how much copper. And that's in the 80s, copper was going pretty strong. And so see, you thought that was all junk. You just made $100, right? And so then they would go and clean out all these buildings like with gusto, because one day's work, and then they'd have a cleaned out space, something I'd live in that was dry, and then I'd put electricity in, and then we'd put in water and get the sewers working, and so they'd have a toilet and a shower, and it would be their own. And then from there they'd make it really nice, right? And then in that we would, be teaching them a trade, and that some guys would like to do this and that. And in my crew of my buddies that I started in Soho, I was the electrician. My buddy Jody was the plumber. Willie was the carpenter. Mojave was the concrete guy. Um, you know, Gary G. He was the painter. Bobby Blue. He was the mud man. And so all these guys, we would take these kids and whatever trade they seemed to like best, they would go work for those guys on projects, and then they'd make money, and they'd make, you know, you know, $100, not working as crazy hard clearing out a, burned out building, and be learning a trade. And I would pay them money to finish school. I'd give them $300 a semester in high school. Finish the semester, I'll give you $300. You graduate, I'll give you $1,000. And in our, we started this housing authority, and we started our own, banking system, of trade. And we also had a, what do they call those things where the community owns a bank? We had one of those. It's still going good. And in 2011, I went to visit one of those neighborhoods, credit union, right? And I was walking down Avenue A, and this woman came running out and go, "Ow, ow!" And she came up and gave me a big hug. And I'm looking at her like, "Who is this person?" Because this is like 30 years has passed, right? I left in '88, and this is 2011. And she goes, "You don't know who I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah." And I said, "Oh, Sarah." And Sarah, I, and 3 other people started the credit union in Lower East Side, right? With just the money in our own pockets, right? And then we got all the people who we got to join the housing authority and got them an apartment. They had to put whatever money they made. They didn't put it in Chase Manhattan Bank, put it in the credit union. She goes, "Guess how much money's in the bank?" And I go, and she goes, first she goes, "Guess what day it is today?" And I go, "Tuesday?" And she goes, "No, this is the 32nd anniversary of the credit union." I said, "Oh, yeah, it's about that." "Oh, yeah, I remember now." And we did it in the Odessa restaurant, right? And, over borscht and tea. And this woman was a legal aid and was in an investment firm. So she understood all the legalities of starting a credit union, right? And we supported her. And she's still, the executor of it, And she's like within her, like I was in my 60s or 50s. And however old, she was a little older than us. Anyway, she goes, "Guess how much money's in the bank?" And I said, "I don't know how much." And she goes, $1 billion. Our credit union, the Lower East Side, had $1 billion. She goes, "It's not in the safe. It's on because we basically, there was an abandoned bank, and we got that building and turned the credit union, and that's still there on Avenue A. As best as I can, it's now almost 10 years since 2011. And anyway, and she goes, "It's not just money in the vault. That $1 billion is in people's businesses and in people's education and people's retirement and all that money, instead of going to the stockholders, it constantly went back out into the community." And that's why the Lower East Side is what it is today. Because all the banks redlined that area. That's why there were hundreds of abandoned buildings there. So that's the kind of inspiration I want to give to you guys. You guys go out and do that stuff. I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. We just did it. Anyway, so 2 hours and 34 minutes and 13 seconds. So let's close our eyes and breathe deep. And breathe out. Time to go to bed. At least for me, it is. Well, since I tweaked this up, I guess I can do more live chats here. I'm not going anywhere tomorrow. It's supposed to rain real hard. So, that's one of the things. the weather really affects the internet with me. So, I think, tomorrow afternoon, it's supposed to rain real hard in the morning, and there's supposed to be a lull in the afternoon, and then another front. So maybe around 1 or 2 o'clock, I will try again. Okay, tomorrow, 1 or 2 o'clock. Look forward to seeing all of you. Sweet dreams, sweet dreams. I love you all. Good night, good night. Sweet, sweet dreams in dreamyland. Dream of good thoughts, of good words, of good actions, of good deeds, of good outcomes. I love you guys. I'll catch you later. Be well. Be safe. Oh,